Well, state lawmakers are taking on a wide range of issues, from school safety to high school sports. And earlier this week, we sat down with House Republican Majority Leader Chuck Efstration to get a sense of what will happen this session, including the current status of rebates for Georgians. A lot of people want to know, okay, we have all this money in the budget. How much is going to come back to me, the people of Georgia, and when?
Yeah, great question. So $6.6 billion has been passed by the General Assembly in recent years in tax relief, tax cuts, and rebates. And we have another $1 billion rebate that we'll be considering this year. This is money going directly back to taxpayers. In addition, the governor today proposed a further income tax cut that will be helpful to all Georgians. The economic benefits that we've seen from the strong financial policy that we've had in the state, I think, has borne out with the great economic growth that we've had in our state. So the rebate would actually be a check in the mail, which is around $500 for married filing jointly. And I think that the tax cut that we're talking about is going to be a continuation of the reduction in income tax that we've passed over the past several years. And so I think that Georgians are going to see this ultimately, certainly on their tax returns, see a meaningful difference due to these tax cuts. Look, taxpayers' money belongs in their wallets, not in government coffers.
We saw several bills introduced just this week, specifically kind of related to gun reform and safe storage. When it comes to the issues of gun violence, and there's gun violence all over the state, but I want to talk about in our schools. I know you had just talked about money for school security. What can be passed, in your opinion?
Not every school system across our state is the same, and imposing a one-size-fits-all approach could have problematic implications. Just, you think about rural Georgia versus Atlanta, Gwinnett County, where I'm from, Metro Atlanta areas. There's just very different needs in different school districts. So I think the allowing for money to be available as grants to local school systems that is meaningful in the amount, so that actual safety improvements, be it infrastructure or alert systems, can be put in place is critical. And then providing follow-up so that the state can continue to be of support to those systems is a critical aspect of this. Now, in addition, funding student mental health needs and also ensuring that there's communication between school districts is an important way to add to the school hardening discussion.
Do you see any areas of like safe storage or anything related to guns specifically passing this session?
Sure. The safe storage legislation that was proposed last year passed the Georgia House and was very close to passage and enactment ultimately. I think that what's important to look, I'm an attorney. I go to a courthouse when I do my work, right? I go pass through security. There are means by which facilities can be secured. Local systems, school systems know where what needs to be done to ensure that their schools can be best secured, and the state being a good partner with those local school systems to ensure that they have the funding, support, advice, input, so that local systems can follow through with that, I believe is the best role for the state to play in this process.
Well, it is clearly the early days of the session. Everybody's laying out their priorities.
Yeah.
It's a lot to break down, which is why it is a great time to bring in our political roundtable. And today we have Val Sabak, Assistant Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting and former Executive Director of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, and Republican strategist Jay Williams, founder and managing principal of the Stone Ridge Group, whose clients have included former Georgia Governor Nathan Deal and the Republican Party of Georgia. You have both been on the show many times before. It's great to have you back. Val, let's start with you. Everybody's kind of putting their flag in the sand here about what their priorities are going into this session. What are you watching for as we head into the days to come?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what the state of Georgia is going to do with the surplus in terms of spending. I'm equally interested to see what kind of legislation, school safety legislation, that we're going to be seeing. We've already seen bills be introduced in response to the Appalachia shooting, and that's going to be something of interest to watch. and there's going to be a bunch of other topics that they're going to be tackling this session that's going to be very interesting.
Two topics, Jay, that we've heard a lot about in the last week. Governor Kemp is pushing tort reform. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, in our conversation, we asked him what his top priority was, and he said licensing reform. And I said, anything else? And he said, yeah, licensing reform. Yeah. These are kind of dry-sounding topics on their front, but why are these such big priorities for Republicans?
I mean, look, I think for Raffensperger, it's, he probably wants licensing reform, but it's probably also a political play. I mean, he's going to connect with all these different industries and all these individuals by trying to reform the licensing for them and build goodwill for them. So I definitely think it's a strategy to move him into the conversation when it's the Senate or Gov race that are coming up. Probably a little bit the same with Brian Kemp. He's tackled a bunch of issues. But with tort reform, it's a big issue that concerns a lot of business owners, Chamber of Commerce types. I think that connects him well with those. And obviously he supports it, but I think there's probably also a political play there as well for his campaign future.
Yeah. And foul tort reform was a big thing, part of the state of the state. Even Governor Kemp saying, if we need to go into a special session, we're going to do that because, this could be his last year to get this thing done. In addition to tort reform, he talked about more tax cuts. He talked about the state of health care here in Georgia. My question for you, Fal, is right now, what is the state of the state in Georgia?
Look, I think the state of the state, we've been the #1 state to do business for over a decade at this point. I think it's trying to continue that and then trying to strengthen the families that are working here to make sure that it also is a #1 place for them to live. I think that's what the state of the state is.
Jay, do you agree with that?
Look, I think the state's in a great spot right now. I think that the governor's done a really great job, and I think that Republicans have done a pretty good job of managing things, and I think we're in a pretty good condition, and I would expect that to continue with this session.
All right, well, we're going to stop right there for now. We're going to have much more panel after the break coming up here.